we found that when leaders started to do that and be very methodical and systematic and prescriptive about, say something as easy as logging their activity in a CRM, it started to trickle down and synthesize across the enterprise. And so we're taking that approach with a lot of our initiatives throughout the enablement ecosphere, is really to train to the top leaders and get the buy-in there, and then help with the full circle back to internal communication, help that trickle throughout the organization and communicate the value that way. So that's just a long-winded way of saying get your leaders bought in, and then hopefully magic can happen.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Digital Diaries. As we are in January and we're all kicking off in SCO season, I'm thrilled to do a special episode all around enablement and the role it supports for sales. I have a wonderful panel of guests who I'm going to let introduce in a moment, but combined you'll have a founder, a sales leader, and a go-to-market expert helping other people. There is a wealth of knowledge and insights, and we have loads of experience to call on. Without further ado, they're going to introduce themselves. Jamie, warm welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Hi, Peter. Thanks very much. Yeah, so I spent about 15 years in sales training, enablement, working with the go-to-market functions, supporting them with everything from mentoring, sales skills, right up to leadership skills. And I focus on sales leaders and other functional leaders to support their ongoing development, including coaching and talent development. Great to be here.
Nice. Well, we're delighted to have you. What's the name of the business, Jamie, that you run now? What do you call it?
I just use my own name, Jamie McGrain. That's it.
Yeah, okay. Very good. I was questioning because the email said...
Yes, very good, very good. That will do as well.
Lovely. And coming to us from New York, I believe, Rishi, warm welcome to the Digital Diaries.
Peter, thank you for having me. A very warm welcome to all the other participants. My name is Rishi Sharma. I'm the head of revenue enablement and a go-to-market leader at Stout, which is a middle market investment banking and corporate finance firm headquartered out of Chicago. I've been in the role for about a couple of years, driving sales enablement for the firm as part of the broader go-to-market remit. But I actually come from a marketing and communications background. Prior to Stout, I was at Hull as chief marketing officer of their investment banking division. And then I spent a number of years at Macquarie, at Capital, a London Stock Exchange, and I started my career at S&P. Running comms for their Capital IQ business unit. So based in New York, I'm married with 2 kids. And I always like to add, what's my or what do I do outside of work? And I am a lover of history. So I like to study history and historical figures and translate that into modern leadership takeaways. So that's the intro on me.
I love that. So firstly, on the Digital Diaries, we do always like to get to know a little bit about the person. I'm going to put you on the spot, though. Give us a historical fact that maybe not everyone knows.
Good question. I'm a big fan of sort of the Hellenistic period, also sort of the Greek period as well, Macedonian period. So a fun fact about Alexander the Great, considered one of the world's greatest conquerors. He was actually only 32 when he passed away. Lots of people think he lived a longer life, but he accomplished a lot in a short amount of time and really changed the course of history and sort of the spread of Greek culture around the world.
That is absolutely incredible. Believe it or not, Rishi, you picked about the one thing I knew about ancient Greeks because a friend of mine had told me recently, but that is a stellar fact and it is profound, his impact.
Yeah.
But we could talk about that all day, but we'll stay on topic. And a returning guest, Neda, welcome back to the Digital Diaries.
Thank you. I am Neda, the founder of Enablement. And before I had founded Enablement, I had spent my entire career in sales, everything from short B2C sales cycle to complex sales at a Fortune 500 company. And what I noticed was that despite the huge differences in size and in budget, they all had the exact same problem. So I decided to do something about it, and now we are here today.
I love it. Leadership and innovation in one thing, Neda. Thank you very much. Well, let's jump right in. When we talk of sales enablement, one of the most important things is actually the strategy you take of enablement. And that journey starts from the moment a person starts with a business, but in today's world, and particularly in technology, is critical. It continues. Jamie, if I can come to you first on this, tell us, what would your view on enablement strategy in today's world be?
In today's world, I suppose it's there's so little time everybody's under time pressure. And I think often in enablement, there's a lot offered, a lot of activities. We can enable on tools, products, process, lots of different things. So I think it's very important for the enablement leaders to work with the go-to-market leaders on what's really the most important things that are going to move the needle. Is it skill-based? Is it product? Maybe there's a new product launch and go-to-market teams really need to be upskilled on that. So very clear alignment with the leaders is an area I think that's very important, and it doesn't always happen. So you really have to work at it as an enablement professional. And I think if the leaders are themselves bought in and see enablement as a key driver of sales effectiveness and of ongoing development within the team, it can be, there can be a great partnership between the two functions, as it were. So yeah, that's probably the key thing for me.
So taking their timing and leadership alignment would be the most important things.
Yeah, and just as a side on that, it's in enablement planning, I think it's good to maybe pick one big thing per quarter and say, okay, we're going to focus on discovery skills, or it's going to be on mutual close plans and the commercial presentation to the prospect or customer. And you do that in depth rather than trying to do 8 or 9 things in a quarter, and you don't really get a lot of ground covered. So you don't get, because you have to repeat on the messaging. You can't just do it once. You have to follow up in one-to-ones, team meetings, all hands. So repetition's very important. And so that's the success I have seen mostly is around sticking to 1 or 2 core priorities that are aligned to the leaders and what they think is important, and then following through on that.
Yeah, I'm trying not to laugh as I'm relatively new to enablement. Open the Google Doc and make a copy must require at least 4 repeats before it actually happens. But Rishi, tell us from your perspective, we're all here in Western Europe, we're all in Ireland, in fact, you're over in the States.
Yeah.
How does that translate for you? Would you agree with what Jamie's saying? Do you share similar experiences?
Absolutely, 100%. I think I love, Jamie, that soundbite on just picking the priorities. I think we tend to get very just kind of in the throes of so many different things happening at so many different times. And the pace of business, especially in finance, I'm talking specifically from the financial services lens now, is super fast, right? And deals are trying to close quickly and people are trying to navigate different priorities. And so picking 1 to 2 things to focus on, perhaps per quarter, that obviously aligns to the commercial strategy and the target channels and target clients, I think is super important. I think the other thing I would probably add, we're thinking about strategically is how can we tell the story internally, right? I think the internal storytelling and the internal case studies are just as important as what we're telling the client and prospect, in terms of what we can add. And so we found that when we get together clusters and pods of folks that have seen successes and seen wins, telling that story and sharing it amongst peers has become really integrated into our overall enablement strategy. So definitely prioritizing and then telling the storytelling is super important. And then just quickly, the last one I'd say is just alignment with go-to-market overall, whether it's kind of top of funnel from a marketing, communications, and brand perspective, or really sort of the business development bottom of funnel perspective as well. I think having alignment throughout the funnel and making sure that we understand what marketing and communications are doing so that can translate and synthesize well to the enablement side, I think is a key area of concern for us too.
It's so critical there, that marketing piece. And, from my account executive days, one of the things that would frustrate me is with some colleagues. I remember one time someone who was selling a marketing product with me was like, oh, don't worry about the latest slides. And I'm like, are you actually kidding me? This is the messaging that we're going with, and you're the one selling marketing product solution here. Come on, it's got to be on point and it's got to be exactly right. So very interesting to see that. What I want to know is how do we balance standardization across global markets? So a challenge that I encounter a lot is, someone in the US saying, oh, we need to do this every which way. But then there's a lot of subtle nuance because, I'm based in EMEA, which is a collection of countries with different cultures, many of which English is a second language, that there's a lot of variance and nuance that I've got to cater for there. Rishi, can I start with you on that one?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, given the global nature of, regardless of industry, right, things are global now. And so the way I tend to think about it from a macro perspective is really looking to the extent that we can and in collaboration with other departments, really standardize the frameworks that we're using, but sort of localize the execution. So execution might look different, sort of geographically and in terms of which channels and industries we're looking at, but the frameworks that we're setting up, the systems, the infrastructure, that all should be standardized. And we should all get buy-in, in my opinion, from leadership and then, the frontline sellers as well. And so we found success. And look, just taking a step back, I think revenue and sales enablement within the finance industry is still in its relative infancy, is still a relatively new function. And so there's still a lot of trying to really educate and sort of articulate to people the value that this brings as a revenue driver in the long term. And so that's part of the discussion that we're having right now. But, again, when we're looking across global markets, it's how can we put together a really robust infrastructure and standardize that, but then the execution is left to the local markets. And obviously it goes hand in hand with the commercial strategy. But I think that we've had success, looking at enablement across geographies in that manner.
Interesting. And Jamie, I know this is something that you've kind of come up against in the past. How have you handled it, and what's been successful and what hasn't in your experience?
Yeah, I empathize with you on this one. It's certainly in global companies, it can be an ongoing challenge, and it's not a new one. So I suppose for certain things, you can globally standardize, and it kind of makes sense to do that, maybe around sales methodology. If you picked MedPick or Challenger or one of the other main ones, it could be around products, assuming that the product is available in all the countries locally. Say, for example, in EMEA, often it's not. So you have to make that very clear. Processes potentially as well, maybe tools, Sales Navigator, HighSpot, various other tools, content management tools, things like that. But I think it's important that the needs of the local leaders, they're being served. And that's the key thing. Sometimes there isn't a translation from global leadership to local leadership around what is going to move the needle. Related to the product skills, process and tools. How it would work is that the global leaders are working with their regional sales leaders to agree on a new methodology or something else that is going to support the individual go-to-market teams. And if there isn't, that the go-to-market leader has the support of the local enablement team to deliver on those needs, and there isn't this back and forth of standardization versus local need. So it's around sponsorship and understanding, I think, the local needs versus the global needs. They need to have that conversation, and sometimes they don't. So if you're able to, as an enabled professional, influence them in that direction, that certainly can reduce some of the tension that may be there.
And that's a really key thing. We're trying to position that enablement directly impacts revenue, it affects by virtue of rep ramp time. How do you actually go about getting leadership sponsorship in that way? And Ned, if I may, I'd like to come to you, because, you're ultimately doing this as a founder of a business right now, saying enablement needs to be a cornerstone of your strategy. What are you hearing from leaders in this capacity, and how do you kind of get them on board, so to speak?
When it comes to leaders buy-in, ultimately a business is about making revenue. And at the end of the day, all decisions and activities, they either directly or indirectly do lead to the increase of revenue. To put it very simple, the more we can tie an activity to how this is relevant for that objective, then it becomes a moral obligation for the leadership to actually be able to support that.
Interesting. Jamie, Rishi, any further thoughts on what Neda said there? Because that's quite an interesting topic before we move on.
Go ahead, Rishi.
No, I think, for us, at the company I work in and with finance in general, I think the leadership buy-in is really important. And then it goes back to that education piece, right? And I think when we think about influenced revenues and how go-to-market activities and by extension enablement activities influence revenues, some of that comes down to systems and technology. And so to get very prescriptive, we have a HubSpot platform, CRM platform that we use, HubSpot.
Yep.
We're encouraging everyone to log their meetings, log their deals, log their opportunities, log the proposals, all the kind of, normal course KPIs and metrics that we use. But that really doesn't happen unless the leadership and the leadership teams are doing that as well, right? And leading by example. And so once we found that, speaking specifically in my use case, we found that when leaders started to do that and be very methodical and systematic and prescriptive about, say something as easy as logging their activity in a CRM, it started to trickle down and synthesize across the enterprise. And so We're taking that approach with a lot of our initiatives throughout the enablement ecosphere is to train the top leaders and get the buy-in there, and then help with the net of full circle back to internal communication, help that trickle throughout the organization and communicate the value that way. So that's just a long-winded way of saying get your leaders bought in, and then hopefully magic can happen.
Yeah, Jamie, what's your experience with that now from what Rishi's just said?
Yeah, everything the guys said, I agree with. I think sometimes you can be lucky with the engagement and sponsorship from the senior leaders. Some are more bought in than others as to the value of enablement. But if you do get that sponsorship and they become a strategic partner for you, you can achieve a lot more than just providing the enablement as you think fit with first and second line leaders, for example. So if you can get that sponsorship and agreement at the top, and then also build relationships with the middle management and lower management, you kind of have a matrixed understanding of the different needs from first line up to senior level. And sometimes the senior level has a different viewpoint or perspective on what reps need in terms of discovery or closing skills or something else. And it may not be reflected at the ground level. So there can be a disconnect there sometimes. And you can help, I suppose, share that communication back and forwards, as Ned mentioned. So yeah, if you have that, I think sponsorship and partnership, you can go a long, long way. But you need to build those relationships and maintain them, of course.
And I suppose that's a great point on building and maintaining those relationships. Netta, how do you do that, and how have you seen it work successfully prior to Itramay as well?
Like how the relationships internally are built.
Yeah, with the leaders, like, because this seems to be, the number one thing that I'm hearing is that, like, leadership support and alignment is a cornerstone to success or failure of an enablement project. Is kind of the tone I'm getting from you. I hope I'm hearing that right, guys.
Yeah.
You're on.
Right.
Yeah.
Essentially, it comes down to the communication. It truly is key to all these things, and having aligned within the priorities to make sure what is our objectives and how can we support each other in the best possible ways. What's the best structure? It's really what Rishi was also talking about before, systems and processes. They are everything. They set the foundation, and the better and more robust system and processes we have, then the communication between people also becomes more productive. And when people start to work together like that, it becomes inevitable for magic to happen.
I like that. I like that magic to happen.
Just a couple.
That's interesting. Yeah, go ahead,
If you
Jamie.
don't mind, I'd just like to add a couple quick things. I think
Yeah.
one also that I found, one area that we found success in is just understanding who you're talking to, right? Like oftentimes we just think very myopically from an external lens, like this is the client and prospect I'm talking to. But when you're trying to sell things internally, understanding your audience and understanding their language, and having some background on who they're targeting and what matters to them, I think goes a long way. Obviously, we don't understand all the technical nuances, especially for a topic that's very in the weeds and very technical. But having even a cursory understanding and being able to talk their language, I think goes a long way to this, what I like to call speed to trust, getting them to trust you. And then once that trust is there, the influence kind of naturally flows organically. And so we found that certainly helps. And then the last thing, there's a good old saying that Americans like to say, which is show me the money. And so, I think KPIs and metrics and dashboards and all that lovely stuff, which is gold dust to executive management. I think the more that you can show the ROI via, the analytics and the data, whether that's dashboards or other, sort of consistent report outs, that certainly helps as well, just in terms of getting folks on board. So just a couple of quick things I wanted to add on that front.
Yeah, no, key. Jamie, anything else you want to add, or we move on?
Yeah, just one quick thing, because Rishi mentioned on it there, that's the trust, and the word that comes from me is the trusted advisor. It's something that we used to work with the account executives on, is like being that advisor and not just a salesperson. Being that with all of your different stakeholders within sales, within the other go-to-market functions. And as you mentioned, Rishi, understanding what's a day in the life like for them. So what a CRO wants is probably different to what a first-line leader wants. But if you're able to serve each of them to some degree, as long as it feeds into the overall objectives of the sales organization as it ties to the company objectives, you're in a good place. And then tying back to the priorities, just don't, bite off more than you can chew and just pick a couple of things that you can get some decent traction with. And I think then, going back to Rishi's point, you can measure that, particularly if you have picked KPIs and you started the measurement, or you can look back through Salesforce or HubSpot, whatever tool you're using, for the before, the during, and the after. And then you can come back and analyze the results together. Like that leads to even more trust, I think, going forward.
I agree. And I really think we've stressed the importance of leadership support. But with that comes a different challenge, which is adaptability. And just over 3 years ago, generative AI exploded. And suddenly nobody knew what ChatGPT was till everybody did. And we all had to learn something a whole lot different. Every company wanted an AI strategy. Adaptability and flexibility was critical for learners. And frankly, in my role, I'm still feeling the AI impact of what it does to enablement. How does that cross your world, guys? Feel free to take the mic.
I'm smiling because I feel like all the meetings I've been in the last 6 months it's just been like AI, automation, and like it's just throwing out a bunch of buzzwords. But no, it's obviously super important, and it's having a visceral impact, across industries and across channels and all that. I think very simply that, there's a lot we can think about when it comes to AI, especially, enablement tools and automation and all that. Very, very important. I tend to think about AI from a content perspective, right? And, it's certainly going to be additive and value add in the long term from a velocity perspective. So how can we churn out more content? That's always kind of a key consideration. But I think as we're using these LLMs and these tools and using them in the content machine, in the content process, it's also helping us to produce stuff that I would call is very point of view. So in finance, for example, we have sophisticated buyers. We have a sophisticated audience, and sometimes what AI will pump out will not necessarily be the right output. The way we're looking at some of these tools is it's kind of like the baseline, and it's helping us put ideas together and frameworks and outlines. And then we're layering in our own brand voice and our own subject matter expertise on top. And that's helped us, pump out more or produce more of that value added point of view driven content that some of our buyers are really looking for. Because I'm sure you'd all agree, there's just a litany of content out there right now. And sometimes it's almost overwhelming, right? You're inundated with stuff. We really want to try and get really as prescriptive and as specific as possible. And so we're now starting to leverage AI to help us with that. So not just velocity, but also helping us to hone in the content and get really specific with our target audience.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And Netta, what would your view on this be?
I think it's amazing. I mean, as Rishi said, we've heard these terms now for a very, very long time. And it is a reason to that. But also something that's not talked enough about is, of course, that AI is only as good as its user. So we all know the potential of AI, but then the question becomes, how can we use it as productively as possible? And how can we truly amplify our work rather than just, I forgot the English word for it, but rather than replacing?
Yes, yeah. Well, thank you for doing this in a second language, Nada. But you're quite right. It's like, how do we use AI? And one experience I had there in a meeting was someone just said, can AI not just do this? And I'm like, where's the input? Because the process was like tracking people's attendance. And I'm like, how are we doing this? Something has to go into this to make it track it. Jamie, well, we've moved very much into AI, but the initial question started back with adaptability and flexibility and how AI disrupted that. What's been your experience kind of in the go-to-market advisory space on this?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, AI is everywhere, as everybody's mentioned so far, and it does have fantastic possibilities. But I think it's the intention that you have behind it. This AI powered this platform, that platform. I mean, if you don't have AI powered platform or whatever tool you're offering, you're behind the game. You have to do that to even be considered a player.
Yeah,
I think it's figuring out for, say, account executives or account managers, go-to-market teams, what could they use AI for in their role that's going to help them save time, be a bit more efficient, cut down on some of the research that they need to do or the more admin-heavy parts of their role, and leverage it for things like that. I know it's used for coaching as well, so AI tools, Netta will be able to speak about this, it's been increasingly used as that, as an aid, but it doesn't necessarily replace the work that the manager or leader needs to do to support the development of their team. So it is that trying to figure out what are we trying to use AI for specifically, rather than we have to jump on the bandwagon because everybody else is doing it. And I think there's that is missing in some companies as they're trying to scramble around, and they feel the pressure that everybody's getting ahead with AI and we're not getting what we need from it because they haven't really got a strategy for it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and they don't understand it fully. I suppose, Ned, I'll come back to you then on that because it kind of does very much tie in tooling in terms of what you're doing. What would you take on this and how people should approach it?
It should be approached by amplifying, not trying to replace. And as I mentioned before, like it's only as good as its user, but also what's the purpose for it? If it's have bad data or it's used in a already broken system, then it's just going to amplify that broken system rather than amplifying what's good. So very clear on the objective. What's the foundation it's starting off with? And then what's, how can we amplify with that? I think there's a lot of predictions that AI will replace and AI will do much more than what we actually will end up with. So I think, as an example, when it comes to sales, I don't think it will replace complex sales in that sense, because we as creature, we're not really that logical. If we were logical, then we wouldn't have people smoking despite it on the cigarette thing. We're quite emotional creatures. We want to feel autonomy. We want to feel that we're the one making decision, and we want to meet with actual humans. So if I would to make some kind of small prediction, AI will help a lot. It will help empower the customer. It will help with helping them to understand their own objectives that they're trying to reach. But at the end of the day, they will want to speak specifically with the human to feel more in control.
I completely agree with you on that, Ned. I think there will always be the human need for the emotional reason. But I also encourage people to look back on technological advances. And at no point in history does it actually eliminate jobs in terms of number. Yes, it eliminates actual specific functions, and people need to pivot. And I think Bill Gates said it best, early on I think it was in the early 80s, he said this: we'll be able to do 5 days work in one, but we all still work 5 days a week. So what actually happened was we just started working more and more and more, and our output became much higher because we got the productivity gains. So the work didn't go away. So I do think it will be a human and AI collaboration is where we're going.
And Peter, I think that's the key, right? And Ned, I love all your sound bites and what you said. And I think at the end of the day, as professionals, we can all appreciate that sales and business development is truly a relationship driven function, right? Obviously, AI and automation is critical to streamlining workflows and list your corporate jargon. It's, I think, having the human element in things and to drive relationships and to drive pipeline. I don't think that's ever going to go away. And I know within financial services and within corporate finance, the relationship aspect and the human aspect is incredibly important. But obviously, we are thinking strategically about how we can layer AI in. And then just the last point, I was talking to someone in the industry, and they use this analogy of garbage in, garbage out. And they were talking about, sort of CRM data, but I guess the same can apply to artificial intelligence as well. I mean, what you put into the system often is what you get out of it. And so having someone that is adept at understanding how to really leverage AI and use AI for the output as a starting point, I think that's going to be incredibly important as we move along.
I couldn't agree more on that. And, I was feeling with generative AI, I was like, I want to get better at what I'm doing. And I knew my prompts had to work. And, when you talk of frameworks, it's the 4 C's: clarity, conciseness, context, and consistency. And I couldn't believe the measure of work that it got. And in my own role, Slack is now a Salesforce company and we have a Slack bot. And I'm like, I want to become a Slack power user because I'm not. So I told it and I said, map out a 4-week plan for me to enable myself on becoming a Slack power user and how to use it. And I'm leveraging it as we go each and every day, which is what we should be doing. But we also need a scale within the organizations. Jamie, I'm going to come to you next. Before I move to the next topic, you want to add to what we just said, or will we move on?
Yeah, just one quick point. I agree
Yeah.
with everything the guys have said around the AI and human collaboration. Some of the research and talking to other people around this topic, as AI continues to advance, there will be the human skills that only humans can do that will become ever more important. So things like decision making, strategic thinking, empathy, and emotional intelligence, that they're going to increase in importance for all leaders within organizations, all the way up from first line to senior level. So it's ironic that AI is not taking the jobs as such. It's going to accentuate what makes us human even more so than
Yeah.
we already have an opportunity to focus on within our leadership roles.
That's a really interesting insight. And as I always say to my learners, humanity is your competitive edge, is the way I just like to phrase it, because I really do believe that. And that takes us nicely into learners. So I do enablement from account executives, from first-time account executives just promoted from BDO right up to senior enterprise AEs, with everything in between. Learner engagement is always a challenge. Jamie, take us through it, because you had to try and enable me in DocuSign, and I don't know how you did that. So, how did you overcome learners like me?
It depends, I suppose, if we're talking onboarding or ongoing learning. So if it's
Well, take both avenues. Give us your view on both, please.
okay. Well, I suppose if it's onboarding, you have a captive audience, and that helps because they're keen to learn. So the engagement is already higher than I suppose it might be for somebody who's already there 6 months or a year.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, how long do you keep them in the onboarding environment for? Is it 8 hours a day, 5 days in a row for 2 weeks? Do you break it up? Have you got a mixture of learning styles and approaches as you deliver the training between video and breakouts and exercises and role plays? There's so many factors that are a part of it.
Yeah.
If they're in the onboarding phase, they're willing to learn, and I suppose there's a buy-in for them to learn, and especially if you include things like proof of learning, some kind of tests or assessments that also increases engagement. Then on an ongoing basis, I think it's important to talk about things and include things in enablement programs that are of interest to them. Not so much that the manager says it. Like, that's important too, but I think often there's a disconnect between what the account executive might want or the account manager and what their manager sees. So
Yeah.
you're already on the back foot if the person who's your direct audience doesn't see that as a need for them, and that can backfire. And that's again where the global standardization is sometimes an issue, because it's like global wants this, and then you've got somebody who's can exist in Dublin or London, and they're like, this isn't relevant for me, why am I going to this training? So there's multiple factors involved in it. I think, but the more alignment you have with what the actual learner wants to learn more on, a pain point for them, how to get better at negotiation or mutual close plans, or how do I figure out what's the key personas for this industry and this market, something that's really relevant they can take directly into their roles. I think the engagement, you have a better chance of it increasing.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Like, if you
bespoke and
literally
customized,
something you can
Jamie.
apply. Go ahead, Rishi. Sorry.
Exactly.
No, I was just
Continue,
saying
Rishi, like-
that all those sound bites really I was just saying all that really resonates with me about, especially particularly around being bespoke and being customized and tailoring it to the needs of the individual or individuals you're talking to. I really see it as beyond onboarding, really just kind of strength training, right? Like get your reps in, have a constant touch point. It's not, just a one shot deal. And I think that's where the magic happens. So there's, within my organization and how we're treating revenue enablement, it's constant, right? It's customized, it's tailored, but there's consistent touch points. We're talking about things that matter to them. And we're trying as a leadership team to understand, again, what are their pain points? Who are they talking to? What are the case studies that they can use that we've seen across the enterprise that have resonated? Not just kind of a blanket approach, but, really kind of targeted by service line or by target industry or by target channel. And then from that we can start peeling back the onion and going layers down, right? And sort of customizing even more. So I think we've found success with that approach. Not a one size fits all, like, here's the great thing and go do it. It's really spending the time and putting the energy to understanding, who you're talking to, what they're trying to accomplish, who they're targeting, and then customizing the enablement program around them instead of just kind of sort of giving it to them and hoping that the magic happens there.
It kind of nearly ties back to the humanity of it. And, I'll always have the outlier learner who asks me some obscure question about data security, privacy, and certs. And I'm like, I don't want to be flippant, but you've just joined Salesforce. You got it covered. The whole website was dedicated to this information. Just take my word that it's okay for now. But Neda, when you were on before, you mentioned a really mind-blowing insight to me about learner attitude, which was A players. Tell us a bit about that and how that works.
Right. So you're referencing to kind of the feedback loop.
Yes, and that the A players tended to be more
Right.
engaged and willing to improve further.
I think every top performer and people who encounter top performer can agree on that they have something in common, and it is this hunger for growth, for continuous learning. And when we learn, obviously, we expose ourselves to certain situations, we get pressure tested, and we then afterward reflect what is it that went good, what is it that needed to be improved, and then we act on that. And it becomes this cycle of iteration of exposing to pressure tested situations, implementing the feedback that we gain from that, and then do it again. And it keeps on iterating like that. And there isn't really any finish line. It's just about continuously growing as a person and having a meaningful career.
Yeah, I agree. Rishi, you're nodding vigorously there. Tell us what's on your mind.
No, just growth mindset, right? I think oftentimes people are a little reticent to get outside of their comfort zone, especially in more conservative industries, because, as the saying goes, people kind of have an idea of what they know, and that's all they know. I think having that, being open to new ways of doing things, the feedback loop is tremendous. I mean, we've seen quite a bit of success when we get people into pods or just talking, openly about what's worked, what hasn't worked, where we can pivot, having those open conversations and breaking down those barriers and having some of that intel and that download from some of the, over here, we call them MVPs. It's very similar to A+ performers. Getting that intel from them is absolutely critical. And then having them communicate that to whatever audience that we're talking to. That feedback loop has really been helpful in terms of making adjustments to our strategy, whether we're in a pitch, we're in a proposal, or whether we're in orals after a pitch has been sent. So I think that's going to remains critical, just in terms for us anyway, and on the sales.
But just one slight tangent, we've all worked in large American companies, so we're down with the lingo. We know what the MVP is. We drink the Kool-Aid. We've got all those lines over here too, Rishi.
Yeah.
Jamie, your kind of thoughts on this in terms of learner engagement and the growth mindset and where it fits in nicely.
Yeah, it's super important. You mentioned A players, Ned, as well. So I think your high performers, they're going to do whatever it takes to hit their number and over exceed it. So they sometimes lone wolves, they kind of crack on regardless of any obstacle in their path, but they're going to be a small percentage of your team, or whether it's a sales team, account management team, CSM team, but especially in the sales environment. So I suppose for everybody, what can really help is coaching by the leader on a regular basis and tuning into what their particular gaps are. It could be skills based, it could be their understanding of the product, it could be how do they present to executives live in person. Enterprise, obviously, reps need to do that a lot more. So I think the leader's understanding of where the gaps are is critical, and then they can use AI, they can use real coaching person to person to support that development. And then you can really see as well if some people have a skill issue or a will issue. And then if there's a willingness issue on behalf of the person to move forwards, then it's a different conversation sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Guys, we've covered a hell of a lot and we've got a little bit of time left. I want to bring two topics together, so feel free to jump on any direction on these. But they're content creation and tooling and how we kind of use them. What is the good strategy for actually developing content? Like in terms of medium, should it be slides? Should it be video? Should it be kind of encouraging whiteboarding sessions? And what tools do we use to support that and give them as resources afterwards? Because anytime I share a slideshow, can I get the deck? And I'm like, yeah, we all know you're never going to look at this, but okay, I'll give it to you. So what are your thoughts on this? Feel free to jump on it.
I think you're right around slides, Peter. People sometimes ask for them and they generally never look at them, like you said. So it's a difficult one. It's hard because there's too much information out there. So again, if we can figure out a single place to put things things around battle cards, competitor information, discovery skills, whatever it might be, whether it's a Google Drive or a content tool. I've seen issues around content tools that so much goes into them, then it's very difficult to find anything. Even with AI search, you still end up getting 700 results for one topic, and then it gets frustrating then trying to work your way through it. Sometimes teams produce their own nuanced content, which isn't great because best practices get locked into different areas, but it's sometimes a knee-jerk reaction to the content issue. I think if you can get people to practice around a topic or a skill in particular and get them to do it, they don't need as much content afterwards to refer back to because they've actually applied it in real life. And it goes back to, I think, Neda's comments earlier on. So the more practical you can make the sessions, the better. And the less slides, sometimes the better.
Yeah. Completely. Rishi, go ahead.
So two things I'll touch on. One is, I think, kind of how we house content. Obviously, digital asset management tools are super important to us. And we leverage them to house our repository of content. That maybe as an addendum, we leverage SharePoint or some other tools internally, like a resource hub, where we kind of keep all of our marketing collateral and our sales trainings and all that sort of thing, our decks, our pitch books. So that's kind of, having some organizational infrastructure or organized infrastructure around our content has been kind of critical in terms of ease of pulling stuff. In terms of the genesis of content, we've experimented with different things. I think one thing that we found that's worked well for us now is kind of this cross-section of understanding what's happening in the market. So whether it's something that's happening in real time or something that's been pervasive and has a longer tail and is impacting our clients, and then tying that to the capabilities that we have as a diversified professional services firm. We bring a multitude of services to our clients. And so oftentimes we're trying to figure out, what's happening in the market that's impacting our clients, right? But then how can we tie that back to a capability within Stout, whether it's in our investment banking division, our valuation division, our disputes division, right? And then coming up with ideas and topics and expanding on that and turning it into whether it's long form content like a white paper or something that's short form, something that's digestible across other channels, whether it be LinkedIn or something else, and then trying to sort of tie it all together and make sure that there's consistency across the execution of all those channels. I think that's been helpful. And just within finance, we've found that a lot of our clients and prospects are consuming information not on web or through an email, although those are tried and true channels of business development. They're actually consuming a lot via LinkedIn and social platforms. And I think that's a whole nother conversation because I'm very bullish on just the growth and amplification of content via digital platforms. But we're seeing a lot of our short form content and sound bites really being engaged with and picked up via platforms like LinkedIn. And a lot of folks are going to LinkedIn now as one example to consume their information. Just two different perspectives, I guess, on content.
Nice. Neda, Jamie, anything to add?
Most of it has been covered. The most important part just to keep in mind is that, you can have the perfect content and all the best content in the world, but if it's not effectively implemented, then what good is it? And previously, we didn't really have the solutions or the technology in order to implement, and we had to rely on most effectively maybe quizzes at the end of their content to test if the sales reps actually knows or not. And, so that's something that's important for people to consider. How can we also take it a step further and implement it effectively and on scale?
Interesting. And Jamie, anything you'd add there?
Just, maybe one final thought to add to the guys. I think it's the repetition, which we would have mentioned earlier on. So if content is created and no matter where it's housed, no matter how incredibly good the architecture is and how easy it is to find, and it's repeated in Slack or some other place, I think whenever you're with your team, whether it's a virtual meeting or an in-person meeting, that you're resurfacing important pieces of content around methodology or product or whatever it might be that's relevant to remind people that it's there as a resource. There's just so many resources. The AEs or account executives are they forget. So it's reminding them where it is and the value of it. I didn't see enough of that, I have to say. And again, the manager's in the same position. There's so much content. How do they even know what the right content is? So that's definitely a role for enablement, is to support leaders with I suppose the most relevant content, particularly in a season, whether it be Q4 or Q1, whatever it might be, or related to a product release or some kind of beta test.
I couldn't agree more. And I really just want to kind of bring it all together now. And first off, say thank you all for joining us. It's been a really, really insightful conversation. If we kind of look back on what we discussed on, I think we could probably agree as a foursome that leadership buy-in is a core pillar for successful enablement. But then we also got to talk to the KPIs and the ROI of what that looks like. And that can vary from one business to the next. And then we want to make sure that we've got the right toolings and strategy. So we don't do AI for the sake of it. We make sure that it's relevant and we're very clear on our focus points quarter over quarter, year over year. And it's better to enable a single topic or two topics very well and get that in the business and manufactured. And then just in terms of kind of resourcing and tooling, we want to make sure that people are supported and know where to go. So I think that's been a really, really rich conversation. But as I said at the start, Rishi, you gave us a historical fact. We like to touch on the personal stuff. So I'll volunteer first off. 2025, my wife turned 40. And just before that, she did her first marathon. Well, it inspired me. I had run before. I'd done a half marathon distance, but we're both doing the Dublin Marathon in October 2026. We're doing it for charity. So it's quite an exciting one. So my 2026 is going to be all about running. But Jamie, what mountain are you going up this year? And I'm being quite literal when I ask you.
Yeah, I'm into the trekking and the hiking. Yeah, so I'm going to the Atlas Mountains actually next week to
Lovely.
attempt one of the mountains there. So and Tube Call. So I'm looking forward to that. It's a nice thing to have a challenge outside of your day to day, something that's totally different, and you can plan for it. And it's nice to have there on the horizon. So that's my plan.
Form of mindfulness and meditation because you're thinking about survival. So everything else just goes out the way.
Yeah.
Rishi, in addition to history or maybe another historical fact, what do you like to get up to?
Well, I think one of my goals this upcoming year as we close out 2025 and head into 2026 is to try and up my golf game.
Nice.
I'm absolutely terrible at it, and which annoys me because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I appreciate the sort of the presence that you need to get better, and it's you against you. And who's who's the best person to go against? It's yourself, right? So I'm hoping to get more golf in 2026, and then also do a little bit of traveling. I'd love to travel. My favorite place to go is to Europe, to England, actually, where I'm originally from. I spent my early childhood in the UK, and I have a lot of family there. So hoping to get over to the UK at some point in the next year. And yeah, that's about it, really.
Yeah, I don't mind admitting London is my favorite city, and
Yes.
working in the industry that I did, it was great to go over. And as regards golf, haven't picked up a club in 10 years, and I once hit my cousin in the head with a driver, so you probably don't want to play with me. Rishi?
We could share some war stories. I might be able to top that, but that's a good one. I like that.
He stood behind me. It was his fault. Neda, the last we spoke, you didn't really have much to go on because you're building a business. Is that still the case, or have we got some free time to be a human being?
I wish I could say something as cool as also running a marathon, maybe some of the upcoming years. But you come a really, really long way by proper walks and the sunshine. So I will focus on getting that more into my regular days.
Nice. Well, look, thank you all. I'll put connections to all your websites and LinkedIn profiles in the show notes. It has been wonderful talking to you today, and have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.